The holographic projector hummed to life in the grand lecture hall of the Galactic Academy, casting a soft blue glow across the amphitheater where 200 students from across the galaxy had gathered. The Academy, perched on the highest peak of Centuria's capital city, was renowned as the most prestigious educational institution in 7-star systems. Its crystalline towers gleamed in the light of 3 moons, visible through the transparent dome ceiling above. Professor Tay adjusted his formal academic robes as he materialized the day's syllabus before each student. His 4 eyes, common among the scholarly Lentari species, scanned the room with practiced precision, noting which students seemed alert and which were already distracted by their neural implants. "Attention, class," Professor Tay's voice resonated through the chamber. "Today we begin our unit on restricted contact species. Please access page 42 of your xenobiology texts." A series of holographic screens flickered to life as students swiped through digital pages. The room filled with the soft whispers of various species, some with tentacles, others with scales, a few composed primarily of sentient gas contained in specialized suits. "First on our list," Professor Tay continued, "is perhaps our most controversial restricted species, humans." The word hung in the air. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others exchanged knowing glances. From the back row, a loud scoff broke the momentary silence. Do-hyun, heir to the Arcturian royal house of the 6th Nebula, leaned back in his specially designed chair that accommodated his 6 limbs. His iridescent blue skin shimmered as he deliberately raised 2 of his arms to draw attention. "Something to contribute, noble Do-hyun?" Professor Tay asked, his voice carefully neutral despite the clear disruption. "Forgive me, Professor," Do-hyun replied, not sounding remotely apologetic. The jewels embedded in his exoskeleton glinted as he gestured dramatically. "But humans? Really? I traveled 16 parsecs to study genuinely dangerous species, not hairless apes barely out of their stone age." A wave of nervous laughter rippled through the class. Professor Tay's secondary eyelids flickered, the only sign of his irritation. "The Galactic Council's classification system is not based on technological advancement alone," the professor explained patiently. "Humans are classified as Level 5 restricted contact for multiple reasons, all of which we will explore in this course." Jinri, a crystalline being from the methane lakes of Nox Prime, raised her translucent appendage. "Professor, my parent cluster participated in the first contact protocols with 7 different species. They said the human classification makes perfect sense." Do-hyun rolled all 4 of his eyes. "Your parent cluster also believes in the superstition of quantum souls." Hardly a credible source. Several of Do-hyun's friends, a tight-knit group of wealthy offspring from powerful families, snickered appreciatively. Jinri's crystalline form flushed deep purple with embarrassment. "That's quite enough," Professor Tay said firmly. "The classification of Earth and human colonies as restricted territories is not up for debate. It is established Galactic Council policy." Do-hyun leaned forward, his ceremonial armor clanking against the desk. "But it's absurd. My family's battle cruiser alone could reduce their primitive planetary defenses to dust. Their spacecraft barely reach their neighboring planets. Their weapons systems are childishly simple. Why should we treat them as dangerous?" The professor's patience was visibly wearing thin. "The danger assessment isn't merely about current technological capabilities, it's about politics," interrupted Do-hyun. "Some counselor got scared by human unpredictability and overreacted. Now we're all supposed to pretend there's some terrifying force." Sumi, a reptilian Vosk student sitting near the front, turned around. "You've clearly never studied Earth's military history, even when humans fought with metal and chemical propellants." "Spare me your human fascination, Sumi," Do-hyun cut her off. "We all know you collect their primitive art forms. Your obsession doesn't make them special." Professor Tay slammed his teaching staff against the floor, sending a pulse of energy across the lecture hall that momentarily disabled all personal devices. The sudden silence was deafening. "Humans," the professor said quietly, "are the only species in recorded galactic history to have nearly exterminated themselves multiple times and yet continued advancing their weapon systems afterward. They are the only known species to have developed nuclear weaponry before achieving unified Planetary government. Their psychological profiles show unique combinations of creativity, aggression, and adaptability that the Council finds concerning. Do-hyun waved dismissively. Ancient history and xenopsychology theories. Has anyone actually seen these supposedly dangerous humans in action? Or are we just perpetuating myths? The challenge hung in the air. Several students looked uncomfortable, while others nodded in agreement with Do-hyun. The class had clearly divided between those who respected the classification and those who thought it ridiculous. Professor Tae stared at Do-hyun for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. An excellent question, noble Do-hyun, one that deserves a substantive answer. The professor tapped his staff again, and a complex series of glyphs appeared in the air. I've just sent a message to an old colleague. Tomorrow, instead of our scheduled lesson, we will have a special guest who can address your skepticism directly. Do-hyun's smug expression faltered slightly. Commander Junho of the Galactic Defense Force will be joining us, Professor Tae continued. He was present during the Martian incident that led to the human containment protocol. I believe his first-hand account will be educational. A murmur of excitement passed through the class. The Martian incident was classified information. Most students had only heard rumors. As the lecture hall emptied after class, Do-hyun gathered his friends around him. Tomorrow will be amusing, he announced, though his confidence seemed slightly forced. Finally, we'll expose this human myth for what it is, an exaggeration designed to give importance to an otherwise unremarkable species. Professor Tae, overhearing as he collected his materials, simply shook his head. Some lessons he knew were best learned the hard way. The next day, the lecture hall buzzed with excitement. Students arrived early, jostling for seats closest to the presentation area. Even species that typically avoided close contact with others had abandoned their usual isolation pods to witness the rare appearance of a Galactic Defense Force commander at the academy. "Did you hear?" whispered Sumi to her study partner. "Commander Junho lost his natural limbs during the Martian incident. They say he refused synthetic replacements and instead opted for the painful integration of mechanical prosthetics, just so he'd never forget." The room fell silent as Professor Tae entered, followed by a figure whose very presence commanded attention. Commander Junho moved with the calculated precision of someone who had faced death and returned with its secrets. His uniform bore the distinctive platinum insignia of the Special Contact Division, and the right side of his face featured an intricate network of scarring that no regenerative technology had been asked to repair. Most striking were his arms, not the sleek synthetic replacements favored by most species, but utilitarian metal and composite constructions that made no attempt to mimic biological limbs. They clicked softly with each movement, a deliberate reminder of whatever had taken his original appendages. "Students of the Academy," Professor Tae began formally, "it is my honor to introduce Commander Junho of the Galactic Defense Force Special Contact Division. Commander Junho has graciously agreed to address your questions regarding the human containment protocol." The commander stepped forward, his artificial hands clasped behind his back. His voice was unexpectedly soft, yet it carried throughout. The room without effort. 52 cycles ago, I was a lieutenant aboard the exploration vessel Distant Horizon. I was young, ambitious, and like many of you, skeptical about the dangers posed by seemingly primitive species. His eyes scanned the room, resting briefly on Do-hyun. That skepticism cost me my arms, 17 members of my crew, and nearly resulted in the first interspecies war in 800 years. A hush fell over the already quiet room. Even Do-hyun seemed momentarily subdued. "Before I take your questions," the commander continued, "I should clarify that I currently serve on the Containment Review Committee, which evaluates contact protocols with Earth every 5 cycles. The committee's consistent recommendation to maintain Level 5 restrictions is not made lightly or without substantial evidence." Do-hyun, recovering his composure, raised 3 of his 6 limbs simultaneously, a deliberate breach of protocol designed to draw attention. Professor Tae's expression tightened, but he nodded for the student to speak. "Commander," Do-hyun's voice carried the practiced confidence of aristocracy, "with all due respect to your service record, many of us have studied comparative xenobiology. Humans lack the natural armor of the Vex, the telepathic abilities of the Sidari, or even the basic radiation resistance of my own species. Their spacecraft can barely reach their outer planets. Their weapon systems rely on primitive chemical propellants and crude energy focusing. The commander's expression remained neutral as Do-hyun continued. We've studied hundreds of species in this program. Humans have no natural weapons, no significant bioadaptations, and technology centuries behind our own. What possible justification exists for their ban, other than political overcaution? Several students murmured in agreement. Others looked embarrassed by Do-hyun's confrontational tone. The commander, however, seemed neither surprised nor offended. An excellent summary of standard xenobiological metrics, he replied calmly. Your assessment would be correct, if those were the only factors that determined species threat assessment. With deliberate movements, Commander Junho reached into a secured compartment in his uniform. He withdrew a small crystal prism that pulsed with internal light, a quantum-locked data storage device of the highest security classification. This, he said, holding up the crystal, contains footage that has never been shared outside military and diplomatic circles of the highest clearance. Professor Tay and I spent considerable time obtaining the necessary authorizations for this viewing. The crystal caught the light, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the lecture hall walls. Several students gasped. Most had never seen a quantum-locked crystal in person. What makes humans dangerous, the commander continued, cannot be measured by conventional metrics. It cannot be quantified in weapons yield calculations or technological advancement timelines. He inserted the crystal into the room's central projector. The lighting automatically dimmed as security protocols engaged. A series of authentication sequences flashed across the projection space, each requiring the commander's biometric verification. What you are about to witness has been restricted to fewer than 300 individuals across the entire Galactic Alliance. The full, unedited footage of the Martian incident that established the human containment protocol 50 cycles ago. Jinri raised her crystalline appendage. Commander, forgive my question, but why share this with students? Why not maintain the classification? The commander's mechanical fingers tapped thoughtfully against his leg. An insightful question. The answer is simple. Because attitudes like young Do-hyun's are becoming increasingly common, there is a growing movement within the Alliance to downgrade human classification based on technological assessments alone. This would be catastrophic, Do-hyun scoffed. Catastrophic seems dramatic for a species confined to a single star system. The commander fixed his gaze directly on Do-hyun. The Arcturian royal house prides itself on military tradition, does it not? On facing threats directly rather than hiding behind diplomatic niceties. Do-hyun straightened, pride evident in his posture. Of course, we face our enemies with courage. Then face this truth with equal courage, the commander replied. What you're about to see will challenge everything you believe about species threat assessment. It will explain why humans are the only species in the known galaxy with a level 5. Containment classification. The projection space flickered as the quantum encryption began to dissolve. The crystal glowed more intensely as its security measures verified the authorized viewing conditions. I warn you, Commander Junho said quietly as the first images began to form. This footage changed how we view our place in the galaxy. After seeing it, you will never think about humans the same way again. The lecture hall fell into complete silence as the classified recording began to play, showing the Galactic Alliance's first and nearly last military encounter with humanity. The lecture hall fell silent as Commander Junho entered alongside Professor Tay. Unlike the typical uniformed officers that occasionally visited the academy, Junho moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had witnessed things most beings couldn't imagine. His uniform wasn't the polished ceremonial dress of a desk officer, but the weathered gear of someone who had served on the front lines. The right side of his face bore a network of scars that no regenerative technology had healed, not because it couldn't, but because he had refused. Before you sits the future of galactic diplomacy and governance, Professor Tay announced formally. Commander Junho has graciously agreed to address your questions about human classification protocols. There are few more qualified. He was part of the committee that established the containment policies 50 cycles ago. The commander's eyes swept across the lecture hall, taking in the diverse array of species. Some students shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, while others, particularly Do-hyun and his circle, maintained their skeptical expressions. "My gratitude for the invitation, Professor," Junho said, his voice surprisingly soft yet commanding. "I understand many of you question the necessity of the Level 5 containment protocols regarding Earth and its colonies." Jinri, a crystalline being who sat near the front, raised a shimmering appendage. "Commander, is it true your ship was involved in the Martian incident?" The historical archives only contain redacted accounts. A ripple of excited whispers passed through the room. The Martian incident was little more than a rumor to most citizens, an event so classified that even mentioning it in some contexts required security clearance. "The distant horizon was indeed my post during that time," Junho confirmed, his expression remaining neutral. "I served as tactical officer under Captain Hyun. Of our crew of 73, 17 did not return." He extended his right arm, the sleeve pulling back to reveal an intricate mechanical prosthetic where organic tissue should have been. Unlike most modern replacements that mimicked biological limbs perfectly, this one was deliberately mechanical. Gears and servos visible beneath clear panels. "I keep this outdated model as a reminder," he explained. "Modern prosthetics would offer perfect replication of my original limb, but I choose to remember what it cost me to underestimate humans." Do-hyun, unwilling to remain silent any longer, raised 3 of his 6 limbs simultaneously, a deliberate breach of Academy protocol designed to draw attention. "Commander," his voice carried the practiced confidence of aristocracy, "with all respect to your service record, many of us have studied comparative xenobiology extensively. Humans lack natural defenses present in virtually every spacefaring species. Their skeletal structure is fragile compared to Voskian exoskeletons. They have no natural armor like the Zentari. Their visual spectrum is limited, their atmospheric requirements narrow, and their lifespans abbreviated." Several students nodded in agreement as Do-hyun continued, warming to his argument. "Their spacecraft barely reach their outer planetary bodies. Their weapons rely on chemical propellants and primitive energy focusing. Their communication technology requires physical infrastructure. We've studied hundreds of species. Humans have no natural weapons, no significant bioadaptations, and technology centuries behind our own." Do-hyun's upper limbs gestured emphatically. "What possible justification exists for their classification above the hive-bound Vrex or the quantum entities of Sigma-9? The commander regarded Do-hyun thoughtfully. "An excellent assessment by conventional metrics. Your analysis would be correct if those were the only factors that determine species threat assessment." With deliberate movements, Junho reached into a secured compartment in his uniform. He withdrew a small crystalline prism that pulsed with internal light, a quantum-locked data storage device that most students had only read about in security protocols. "This," he said, holding the crystal where all could see it, "contains unedited footage from the Martian incident. Professor Tay and I spent 16 cycles obtaining clearances for this viewing. What you're about to witness has been shared with fewer than 300 individuals across the entire Galactic Alliance." The quantum crystal caught the light, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the lecture hall. The Academy's security systems automatically engaged, creating a containment field around the room and disabling all personal recording devices. "The Arcturian Royal House has a proud military tradition," Junho said, looking directly at Do-hyun. "You understand the importance of respecting an adversary's capabilities, yes?" Do-hyun straightened, pride evident in his posture. "We face our enemies with courage, not ignorance." "Then face this truth with equal courage," Junho replied, inserting the crystal into the room's central projector. "What makes humans unique cannot be measured by conventional metrics or technological advancement timelines." The lighting dimmed as security protocols engaged. A series of authentication sequences flashed across the projection space, each requiring the commander's biometric verification. The crystal glowed more intensely, bathing the room in an eerie blue light. 52 cycles ago," Junho said as the verification completed, "the mining vessel Abundant Harvest, owned by the Drenlax Corporation, discovered significant titanium deposits on the fourth planet of the Sol system, what humans call Mars. At the time, Sol was listed as a pre-contact system, pending evaluation. The Drenlax ignored this classification, believing the primitive status of human technology would allow them to extract resources without detection. The projection space came alive with three-dimensional imagery. Students gasped as they witnessed the massive Drenlax harvester ships entering Martian orbit, their extraction beams carving into the red planet's surface. The footage was crisp, taken from a Galactic Alliance monitoring satellite. "What you're seeing happened 3 days before our scout ship arrived," Junho explained. The Drenlax had begun full-scale operations, extracting approximately 6,000 tons of material hourly. The projection shifted to show a small fleet of unfamiliar vessels approaching Mars from Earth orbit. Their design was angular, utilitarian, clearly not built for aesthetics but functionality. "These," Junho said quietly, "are human military vessels. Their technology was indeed primitive by our standards. Chemical propellants, limited shielding, no artificial gravity. But what happened next changed how the Alliance views pre-contact species assessment forever. The human ships established orbit around Mars, positioning themselves between the Drenlax harvesters and their extraction sites. A communication was transmitted, simple radio waves carrying a basic message in the galactic standard language that had been broadcast throughout their system for decades as part of the pre-contact preparation protocol. "This is Captain Yunjin Kim of the United Earth Space Force. You are extracting resources from a human settlement zone without authorization. Cease operations immediately and withdraw from Martian orbit." The footage showed the Drenlax response. Dismissive message, followed by the activation of their defensive screens. The Drenlax vessel captain wasn't concerned, Junho explained. Their vessels were centuries more advanced. Their shields could withstand energy weapons far beyond what humans possessed. They expected compliance, or at worst, ineffective resistance. What happened next caused several students to rise from their seats in shock. The human vessels, rather than retreating, accelerated directly toward the Drenlax ships. Before the alien vessels could react, the humans fired. Not energy weapons, but physical projectiles accelerated to tremendous speeds. Kinetic impactors, Junho explained. The Drenlax shields were designed to disperse energy weapons, not stop physical objects moving at near relativistic speeds. The humans understood their technological limitations and adapted accordingly. The footage showed the devastating impacts, the Drenlax shields flickering and failing as the kinetic weapons tore through their hulls. Emergency protocols sent out distress signals, which brought the distant horizon to the scene 3 hours later. "What you're about to see," Junho said softly, "is why humans are the only species in the known galaxy with a Level 5 containment classification." The projection shifted to show the distant horizon arriving at Mars, responding to the Drenlax distress call. The footage now came from the ship's own cameras, showing Commander Junho, 50 cycles younger, on the bridge as they assessed the situation. The distant horizon had attempted to establish a neutral position, offering to mediate the conflict. The humans had responded not with aggression, but with a simple request, that the Galactic Alliance respect their territorial claims and remove the Drenlax from their system. "We thought we understood the situation," Junho narrated as the scene unfolded. "A pre-contact species defending its territory against unauthorized resource extraction, a legitimate grievance that could be resolved through diplomatic channels. What we failed to understand was that we weren't dealing with a typical developing species." The projection showed the distant horizon's captain explaining galactic protocols to the human commander, assuring them that the Drenlax would be sanctioned for violating pre-contact directives. The humans listened politely, then made their position clear. All non-human vessels were to leave the Sol system immediately. This was not a negotiation. "We made a critical error," Junho admitted. "We assumed their request was a negotiating position. We didn't realize it was an ultimatum." When the galactic vessel declined to leave and attempted to establish a peacekeeping presence, the human response was immediate and overwhelming. The footage showed something none of the students had ever witnessed. Dozens, then hundreds of previously undetected human vessels emerging from hiding positions behind Martian moons and orbital debris fields. They had prepared for this encounter, Junho explained. While we detected only their visible fleet, they had positioned their entire defense force in concealed locations, a tactical approach no other known species had ever employed on first contact. The lecture hall was completely silent now, all eyes fixed on the projection as it showed the human fleet executing a precisely coordinated attack. Not just against the Drenlax vessels, but targeting specific systems on the distant horizon, communications, engines, weapons. They didn't want to destroy us, Junho said quietly. They wanted to disable us, to demonstrate their capabilities while minimizing casualties. It was a level of strategic thinking we had never encountered in a pre-contact species. The final moments of the footage showed something that caused several students to gasp. Human boarding parties breaching the distant horizon's hull, navigating in vacuum conditions with minimal protection, continuing to function despite injuries that would incapacitate most known species. This, Junho said, gesturing to his scarred face and mechanical arm, was the result of my encounter with a human boarding team. I had assumed their primitive environmental suits would make them vulnerable. I was wrong. The footage ended, the crystal's glow fading as the projection disappeared. For several moments, no one spoke. The Martian incident taught us something. Profound, Junho finally said. Technological advancement alone is not an accurate predictor of species capability. What makes humans unique and dangerous is their adaptability, their strategic thinking, and most importantly, their psychological makeup. Dohyun, his earlier confidence clearly shaken, finally spoke. But they were defending their territory. Surely that doesn't warrant galactic-wide restrictions. It wasn't their victory that led to the containment protocol, Junho replied. It was what we learned afterward when we studied their history. He touched a control on his uniform, and a new image appeared, a timeline of human warfare spanning thousands of years. Humans are the only known species to have nearly exterminated themselves multiple times, yet continued developing increasingly devastating weapons. They are the only species known to have deployed atomic weapons against their own kind, and then, rather than abandoning such technology in horror, perfected it. Junho's voice remained steady as he continued. The Level 5 containment protocol wasn't established to protect the galaxy from human aggression. It was created to protect humans from exploitation that would inevitably trigger their unparalleled capacity for warfare. What you're about to see is the justification for that decision. He removed the crystal from the projector and inserted another, smaller one that had been hidden within his uniform. What you're about to see has been restricted to even fewer individuals. The final assessment that led to the unanimous vote for containment. The second crystal slid into the projector with a soft click. Unlike the blue glow of the previous recording, this one pulsed with a deep red light that cast eerie shadows across the students' faces. The room's temperature regulation systems seemed to falter momentarily, as if even they recognized the gravity of what was about to be revealed. This footage, Commander Junho said quietly, is what convinced the High Council to unanimously approve the containment protocol. The projection began without preamble. No security warnings, no classification notices. Just raw footage from what appeared to be helmet cameras worn by Alliance peacekeepers during the Martian incident. The perspective shifted rapidly between different soldiers, creating a disorienting mosaic of the conflict from multiple angles. What you're seeing now is the direct neural feed from our boarding countermeasure team, Junho explained. Elite soldiers from 6 different species, all veterans of at least 3 campaign cycles. They were dispatched to recapture our command deck after humans breached our hull. The footage showed Alliance soldiers moving through the corridors of the distant horizon with practiced precision, their advanced weapons at the ready. They communicated through neural links, their coordination perfect after years of training. Together, they were the best the Alliance had to offer, confident in their superior technology and experience. Then came the encounter. The human boarding party was outnumbered 2 to 1. Their equipment was visibly inferior. Simplistic pressure, suits instead of powered armor, handheld weapons instead of neural-linked targeting systems. By any conventional assessment, they should have surrendered immediately. Instead, they attacked, not as individuals, but as a coordinated unit that seemed to anticipate the Alliance team's tactics. They used the ship's architecture in ways the designers had never intended, removing wall panels to create unexpected firing positions, deliberately rupturing cooling systems to fill corridors with obscuring vapor. Notice their communication method, Junho pointed out. Hand signals and verbal codes, not neural links, yet their coordination was flawless. One sequence showed a human soldier continuing to fight after a plasma discharge had severed their leg below the knee. The human had simply applied a tourniquet, injected something into their thigh, and continued providing covering fire for their team. This behavior, Junho said, was completely outside our understanding of pain response thresholds. No known species would continue combat operations after such an injury. The projection shifted to medical scans taken of captured human soldiers. The data scrolled alongside anatomical models, highlighting unusual features. Humans possess a unique biochemical response to threat situations, Junho explained. Their bodies produce compounds that can temporarily override pain, increase muscle output beyond sustainable levels, and accelerate decision-making at the cost of long-term physical damage. They call it their fight-or-flight response, but it's unlike anything we've documented in other species. In essence, they can choose to sacrifice their body's long-term integrity for immediate survival advantages. Jinri raised a trembling, crystalline appendage. But surely that's an evolutionary disadvantage, to damage oneself for temporary gain. In most environments, yes, Junho agreed. But Earth is what xenobiologists now classify as a death world, a planet where environmental conditions are so challenging that life forms must develop extreme adaptations to survive. Humans evolved on a planet that constantly tried to kill them extreme temperature variations, natural disasters, predators, pathogens. Their entire evolutionary history is a story of overcoming impossible odds. The projection changed to historical footage from Earth itself, images that caused several students to look away in distress. Human warfare through the ages, from primitive, tribal conflicts with handheld weapons to mechanized warfare on a planetary scale. This, Junho said softly, is what truly sets humans apart. Every spacefaring species in the Alliance developed weapons technology as a response to external threats. Humans developed their most devastating weapons to use against themselves. The timeline continued, showing the rapid acceleration of human weapon development. From gunpowder to nuclear fission in less than 1,000 years, a pace unprecedented in galactic history. Now observe this carefully, Junho directed, as the projection shifted to show the aftermath of human conflicts. But instead of continued destruction, it showed something unexpected: rebuilding, cooperation, advancement emerging from the ashes of devastation. This pattern is unique to humans, Junho explained. They push themselves to the brink of extinction, then pull back and use the technologies developed for warfare to advance their civilization. It's a cycle they've repeated throughout their history, a form of cultural evolution through crisis that no other species practices. The footage shifted again, this time to the interrogation of captured human soldiers after the Martian incident. Though the humans were injured and restrained, their demeanor showed no fear. When questioned about their willingness to engage a technologically superior force, one human officer had simply smiled. "You have better ships," the officer acknowledged in the recording. "Better weapons, better shields. But we have something you don't seem to understand." "And what is that?" asked the Alliance interrogator. "Backs against the wall," the human replied calmly. "Throughout our history, humans have never been more dangerous than when we have nothing left to lose. You came to our home. You threatened our planet. There was only one possible response." Do-hyun, his blue skin now pale and his posture no longer carrying its usual arrogance, finally found his voice. "But if they're so dangerous, why not simply eliminate them? Why containment instead of neutralization?" The room fell silent at the suggestion. Commander Junho turned to face the Arcturian student directly. "That proposal was considered," he admitted, causing gasps among the students. For the first time in 800 years, the Alliance Security Council debated a preemptive species. Neutralization. The projection showed the council chamber, representatives from hundreds of worlds arguing passionately. The debate had clearly been heated, with many supporting the extreme measure Do-hyun had suggested. The vote was scheduled. The fleet was assembled. Junho continued. Then something unexpected happened. The projection showed a small alliance diplomatic vessel approaching Earth. Against all recommendations, a senior diplomat had chosen to meet directly with human leaders, not as a superior force laying down terms, but as equals seeking understanding. Ambassador. Kyun took the greatest risk in modern diplomatic history, Junho explained. She went alone without military escort to speak with the humans. She returned 3 days later and addressed the Security Council. Her testimony changed everything. The projection showed the elderly ambassador, her tentacles arranged in the formal pattern of absolute truth-binding, as she addressed the council. I have looked into their eyes, she said. I have learned their history. I have walked their world, and I tell you now with absolute certainty, if we attack them, we will regret it for generations to come. She raised a data crystal similar to the one Junho had used. They showed me their art, their music, their philosophy. They showed me how they nurture their young, how they care for their sick, how they mourn their dead. The same capacity for extremity that makes them dangerous in warfare, makes them capable of depths of compassion, creativity and cooperation that we would be fools to extinguish from our galaxy. The council chamber erupted in debate, but the ambassador continued, her voice rising above the chaos. More importantly, they showed me what they would do if attacked. Their contingency plans, their dispersal protocols, their dead-hand response systems. If we strike them, we may destroy their homeworld, but we will never eliminate them. They have prepared for extinction-level events, both natural and deliberate, for generations. And those who survive will never rest until they have extracted a price from us that none here are willing to pay. The projection showed the council vote, a narrow decision against neutralization and for containment instead. Not out of mercy, but out of the realization that humans could not be eliminated without unacceptable consequences. The containment protocol, Junho concluded, isn't primarily to protect the galaxy from human aggression. It's to protect humans from the exploitation that would inevitably trigger their unparalleled capacity for warfare. We contain them not because we fear their conquest, but because we fear their response to perceived threats. He turned to Do-hyun, whose earlier mockery had been replaced by stunned silence. Now do you understand? The ban isn't prejudice. It's survival. For all of us. Do-hyun looked up, his multiple eyes wide with a new emotion none of his classmates had ever seen in him before. Humility. I understand now, he whispered. We mock what we don't comprehend, and we nearly laughed ourselves into extinction. The academy halls felt different in the days following Commander Junho's presentation. The usual chatter about interstellar politics and xenobiology theory had been replaced by hushed conversations about humans. Students who had never given Earth a second thought now crowded the library archives, requesting access to the limited materials available on human history. Professor Tae observed this shift with quiet satisfaction as he entered the lecture hall 3 days later. The room fell silent immediately, a marked change from the casual atmosphere that had prevailed before. I see the commander's presentation made an impression, he noted, surveying the attentive faces. Good. Today, we begin a special research assignment that will occupy the remainder of this term. The holographic projector hummed to life, displaying a 3-dimensional map of Earth and its solar system. Around it floated images of human achievements, architectural wonders, artistic masterpieces and scientific breakthroughs. While most of you have been led to believe that human contact is completely forbidden, the truth is more nuanced, Professor Tae explained. For the past 30 cycles, the Alliance has permitted carefully controlled cultural exchange under E, the Proximate Understanding Initiative. Sumi, the reptilian student who had previously defended humans, leaned forward eagerly. Is that why human music has been appearing in the underground markets? Those haunting vocal harmonies that were popular last stellar cycle? Professor Tae's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, his species equivalent of an amused smile. Indeed. The Alliance Cultural Affairs Bureau introduces selected human artistic works through seemingly unofficial channels. It allows us to study galactic reaction to human creativity without acknowledging official contact. He tapped his control pad, and the holographic display expanded to reveal something unexpected. A space station of clearly non-human design positioned at the edge of Sol system. The Watchful Eye outpost, he explained, officially classified as an astronomical research station. In reality, it's our primary hub for observing and selectively interacting with human civilization. Jinri raised her crystalline appendage. Professor, I'm confused. If humans are as volatile as the commander's presentation suggested, why risk any contact at all? An excellent question. The answer lies in what Ambassador Kion discovered 50 cycles ago, humanity's paradoxical nature. Professor Tay expanded the holographic display to show side-by-side images, human warfare alongside human medical breakthroughs, weapons development alongside space exploration initiatives. The same capacity for extremity that makes humans dangerous also drives their extraordinary creativity and problem-solving abilities. Their art forms evoke emotional responses across species boundaries. Their mathematical insights have resolved theoretical problems that stumped our best minds for generations. The professor dimmed the main lights and activated a different projection, a three-dimensional representation of a molecular structure that rotated slowly in the center of the room. This compound was synthesized by human biochemists 20 cycles, ago as a treatment for a condition they call Alzheimer's disease. When our xenobiologists examined it, they discovered it could be modified to treat neural degradation in 17 different alliance species. A human medical cure, developed on their isolated world with no knowledge of alien biology, has saved millions of non-human lives. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Your assignment, Professor Tay continued, is to work in groups, to analyze how human creativity might contribute to solving persistent galactic challenges, without triggering the defensive responses that make them dangerous. To everyone's surprise, Do-Yun raised a single limb, the proper, respectful way to request recognition. Professor, he said, his voice lacking its usual arrogant tone, I would like to propose a research focus on human diplomatic methodologies. Their history shows they've developed unusual approaches to resolving conflicts between disparate cultural groups. Professor Tay couldn't hide his surprise. An unexpected choice from you, noble Do-Yun. The commander's presentation was illuminating, Do-Yun admitted. I've been reviewing the available materials on human conflict resolution. Their techniques for managing their own internal diversity might offer insights for our continuing challenges with the RIM Collective. Over the following weeks, the class transformed. Students who had mockingly dismissed humans now immersed themselves in studying Earth's history and culture. The library's limited human archives, previously rarely accessed, now required a reservation system to manage demand. Most surprising was Do-Hyun's transformation. The once arrogant Arcturian had become humble, focused, and collaborative. He organized a study group that met after hours in the simulation chamber, where they used the Academy's limited data to recreate key moments from human diplomatic history. Their United Nations framework represents a fascinating approach, E.T. explained to his group as they stood within a holographic recreation of the General Assembly Hall. Unlike our Alliance Council, they built a system that acknowledges continuing sovereignty while establishing shared principles. It's messier than our consensus model, but more adaptable to cultural variation. Professor Tay watched these sessions remotely, noting with satisfaction how the students were developing insights that had eluded even senior Alliance diplomats. When Do-Hyun's group successfully simulated a resolution to the centuries-old dispute between the Vex hegemony and the Free Worlds, using modified human diplomatic protocols, he decided it was time for the next phase. 6 weeks into the project, Professor Tay entered the classroom accompanied by an unexpected guest. The tall, slender figure wore the distinctive blue uniform of the Alliance Diplomatic Corps, but her facial features marked her as something else entirely, a genetic hybrid, partially human. This is Special Envoy Mina, Professor Tay introduced her. She is part of the cultural exchange program I mentioned and has graciously agreed to answer your questions about her experiences bridging our civilizations. The students stared in fascination. Most had never seen a human, even in recordings beyond the classified footage. The envoy's appearance, similar to many humanoid alliance species, but with subtle differences, was both familiar and alien. Mother was a xenoanthropologist from the Pleiadian Commonwealth, she explained, anticipating their questions about her origin. My father was a human professor of comparative linguistics. They met during the first authorized academic exchange 26 cycles ago. I represent the future we're working toward, the careful integration of humanity into galactic society. Do-hyun approached her after the formal session, his aristocratic bearing now tempered with genuine curiosity. Envoy Mina, your existence suggests the Alliance leadership believes integration is possible. Given what we now know about human defensive responses, how is this being approached? The envoy regarded him thoughtfully. 3 principles guide our work. First, absolute transparency. We never observe humans without their knowledge and consent. Second, equal exchange. Humans receive as much information and technology as they provide. Third, gradual exposure. We're currently in year 38 of a 200-cycle integration plan. 200 cycles, Do-hyun exclaimed. That's longer than any previous species integration. Humans require special consideration, she agreed. But progress has been remarkable. The current generation of human leaders understands the necessity of demonstrating stability before full contact. They're working to resolve their internal conflicts and environmental challenges to prove they're ready for wider engagement. The HFY Academy recognized the value of the class's work. By term's end, Professor Tay announced the establishment of a permanent human studies curriculum, the first in any non-military educational institution. More surprising was the announcement of an exchange program that would allow select Academy students to visit the Watchful Eye Station. Do-hyun, once the class skeptic, was among the first selected. The day before his departure, he visited Professor Tay's office. I wanted to thank you, he said, his formal posture unable to hide his excitement. If you hadn't arranged Commander Junho's presentation, I would have continued in my ignorance. Professor Tay's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Sometimes, the most important lessons begin with acknowledging what we don't understand. The commander's footage showed humanity's capacity for destruction, but that's only half the story. Your task now is to discover the rest. Do you truly believe integration is possible? Do-hyun asked. That someday humans will join the Alliance. As full members. The professor moved to his window, gazing out at the academy grounds where students from 100 worlds studied together. I believe that the galaxy needs humanity, their creativity, their resilience, their unique perspective. And I believe humanity needs the galaxy, our stability, our diversity, our accumulated wisdom. The path to bringing these together safely may be long, but it's one worth walking. With respect, patience, and understanding, even the most dangerous species can become our greatest allies. As Do-hyun boarded the shuttle for the Watchful Eye Station the next morning, he carried with him not just research materials and personal belongings, but something more valuable, a newfound respect for a species he had once mocked, and a determination to build bridges where others saw only walls. From the observation deck, he watched as his homeworld shrank to a distant point of light. Ahead lay the Sol system and his first glimpse of Earth, not as a curiosity or a threat, but as the home of a complex species whose unique nature might someday transform the galaxy. And all because he had seen the footage. The end.